Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be looking at AQA's Paper 2 question 4, which is all about comparing writers' viewpoints and perspectives. In fact, it's the name of the exam itself, really, Paper 2, all about viewpoints and perspectives. And in this question, which I think students find the hardest of all 5 in that Paper 2 task, you are comparing what two writers think and feel about something. I've got emojis here down the right because they're quite good at visually showing what somebody feels about something, and I'm sure that most of us use at least one every day in our text messages. And they're quite useful to visually and symbolically represent how we feel and what we think about something, which is essentially what our writers are doing through their language. For this video, I'm going to be looking at the topic of tattoos, which is why we have a picture there of a young woman with quite a lot of tattoos, actually. And this video is all about comparing what two writers think of tattoos. And what we'll do, as is the case usually with my videos, is we'll start from basics. So what this question is asking you to do, and then we'll look at two extracts and we'll finish the video by giving you an example of what a good answer looks like for this question, thinking also about the mark scheme and what the examiner is asking you to do. So that is the purpose of this video. To begin with, though, let's put the spotlight on you. What's your view about tattoos? And what I would probably get my students to do if I was teaching these extracts is I would ask students to perhaps write down 2 sentences that convey their opinion of tattoos. And once they have written those 2 sentences, to look at what they've written and then look at what words and phrases they've used, how would you describe their tone, and also come up with 3 adjectives to describe their attitude as well. So I would start to kind of put the student in the hot seat and then get them to reflect on the writing and the language that they've used, which is essentially what you're doing with 2 other writers with your extracts. So that can be a nice way to kind of look at this question to begin with, as like a starter activity perhaps. So let's remind ourselves of what this question is actually asking you to do. So paper 2, as already said, is called Writers' Viewpoints and Perspectives. Question 4 sits within the reading section, so you are not going to be marked on spelling, punctuation and grammar, and you're not writing about your view, because that is something you would do for question 5, the writing task. In this task, you are comparing what the 2 writers are saying in their 2 extracts. And those 2 extracts will probably be 2 centuries apart. One of them will always be 19th century Victorian. And you are comparing what each writer thinks and feels. But the extracts, despite their differences in time, will tend to be about the same theme or the same topic. And so I'm positive you've looked at previous exam papers over the years. Despite sometimes the extracts being 200 years apart, the extracts will be linked by the same topic. In order to get the highest marks, the 16 which this is out of, you need to be able to link the writer's methods to an investigation into their viewpoints. So you need to tie in your language skills as well. So methods here means language, words, phrases, techniques, but it can also mean sentence forms as well, such as imperative, declarative, interrogative, and so on. So sentence types also can be included in that label. Because this is a reading question, you are still quoting evidence from both extracts. And in order to, again, do well, you must talk about both writers. If you talk about one extract, you won't be able to hit full marks. You might actually be capped at half marks. And you've got around 20 minutes for this task. So I would expect my students to perhaps write 2 paragraphs, 1 paragraph about each writer. But again, your teacher has probably told you the way to structure your answer for this. So the strategy that I use when I teach this question, I always say that this question is a challenge because students are spinning multiple plates with this, which is why it's rewarded quite highly in the marks scheme. So the more marks means you're doing more. And you can see with this approach that there is a number of things to think about before you actually commit to writing an answer. So step one, of course, you have to read both extracts before you write your answer. And you also need to be highlighting quotes as you read to save time. And what you are highlighting is evidence that gives you a clue as to what they think and feel about the topic that they're talking about. So in today's video, you're looking for any evidence that suggests what their attitudes are about tattoos. Step 3 is you then need to look at what you've highlighted and you need to go and spot any methods, whether that's any language devices or word types like adjectives or adverbs, but also look at sentence types such as interrogatives, declaratives, or long and short sentences and so on. So you then need to look at your methods. Step 4 requires you to label what each writer feels. So I'll show you that in the next slides. Maybe 3, possibly 4 words that describe their attitude. And finally, step 5 is why. So it's not enough to say, oh, so-and-so has an angry attitude, so-and-so has a happy attitude, because the examiner's question is then going to be why. Why do they have that attitude? What is the reason for that perspective? So only once students have gone through those 5 steps will they be in a position to write a good answer. If any of those steps are missing, it can often mean a less successful response. So step 4 involves what I call feelings words or sometimes attitude words. In previous videos I have used a feelings wheel, which I found years ago, which was a wheel which included lots of different adjectives that we would use to describe how somebody felt. Haven't used that here. I am using instead a simple table, and you can see that I've got positive and negative, and underneath that I've given you perhaps 12 to 15 different adjectives which we would use to describe somebody's attitude. And this is what you are comparing for this question. The attitudes of the writer. Sometimes students forget that. They end up writing another question to answer, where they're simply comparing the differences between 2 things. Actually, whereas you're still working with the same extracts, you're now focusing on the writer. What does the writer think based on the tone, based on the language that they've used? So students need to be using these words in their answer in order to compare their attitudes, because these words are essentially about their attitude. Notice that I try to get students to not use positive and negative because that can encompass a broader range of feelings. So positive is a bit broad, negative is a bit simplistic. So I would try to get my students to be as specific as possible in terms of how or what they actually feel by using some of these words. So in that exam, you need to go into the exam ready to use some of these words to compare those writers' perspectives. So that's step 4. We need to select words for each writer here. So that is the kind of theory regarding this question, that what I've told you so far is the same regardless of whatever extract you get. It's the same approach. But now, for the rest of the video, we're going to be looking at a specific question, looking at 2 extracts to practice this. And the question that we're looking at is this one. Compare how 2 writers convey their different attitudes towards tattoos, 16 marks. So that is what we're looking at, the topic of tattoos. Okay, so the source A, the more modern extract, is written by a man called Tony Parsons. And as I read through this extract, you can be jotting down phrases, for example, that give you a clue as to what Tony Parsons thinks and feels about tattoos. You'll probably be able to work it out relatively quickly based on his tone and what he says. So what I'll do is I'll read source A first, and then we'll start to think about, well, what could we say in our answer. So he says, his headline, for example, might give it away: making my skin crawl, tattoos scream for attention. So already, think about which side of this table you think this is going to fit into. You might already have a clue now about what his attitude might be. So he says, as soon as the sun starts shining, I realise with a sinking heart that Britain is now a tattooed nation. Tattoos are everywhere. You see them on firm young flesh and on wobbly middle-aged flab, as common now on the school run and in the supermarket queue as they are on some footballer or his wife. I feel like the last man left alive whose skin crawls at the sight of these crass daubings. I feel like the only person in the world who sees David Beckham modelling his swimming pants on the cover of Owl magazine and thinks, oh, how much better a handsome guy like you would look, David, without all those dubbing stains stitched into your skin. I feel like nobody else looks at little Cheryl Cole, so pretty, so smiley, and recalls at the sight of the florist shop that she has permanently engraved on her lovely body. Tattoos scream for attention. Tattoos say, look at me. I guess the person with the tattoo imagines that, somehow, having a martial arts symbol or a badly drawn flower or a sentimental heart expresses their individuality. The end result is a million simple souls, all with exactly the same primitive daubings, all telling you what an individual they are. On Tuesday, a tattooed lady called Joanna Southgate, pretty, blonde, young, swerved past the dress code at Royal Ascot by waiting until she was inside before revealing that her arms are covered in what looks like a 3-year-old's finger paintings. Joanna looks so proud, but why? She has ravaged her natural good looks with what, at best, looks like cartoons done by someone who flunked their art GCSE. Tattoos are her choice, but tattoos are self-mutilation. Tattoos are a tragedy. Having 10th-rate art on your body for life is now part of the national fabric. Did I say that Britain is a tattooed nation? Strike that. Britain is the tattooed nation. Tattoos are so widespread, so ugly, and so very, very permanent. You can, in theory, have them removed, but a large chunk of your living flesh will go with it. The tattooed nation will live to regret this voluntary disfigurement. Already I sense that some of our celebs are covering up. You don't see Cheryl Cole's florist shop nearly as often as you used to. It used to be that you made a mark on your body because you couldn't make a mark on the world. With adored multimillionaires like Beckham stoking that tattoo craze, that is clearly no longer the case. But some things never change. A tattoo doesn't make you look like an individual. A tattoo makes you look like a thicko. You will all look so silly when you're 60. Okay, so that is half of what you've got to read. You need to now be in a position to start thinking about, okay, so what does he think? So you can pause this video now and obviously go back. Find your quotes and write them down, which you think tell you what he thinks of tattoos. Look at what you've highlighted to see if there's any methods going on. Come up with 3 adjectives from that table that label the attitude of the writer. And then finally, think about why he has this view. What does he accuse tattoos of? Why doesn't he like them? And so on. So you can pause the video now and think about those things. Okay, so we have here our table, and in the exam you probably won't have enough time to do something like this for yourself. This is just for practice, but you can see we've got the attitude words at the top, the evidence, and why he has these views. So he's unimpressed, he's confused, he's judgmental, he's sarcastic, he's dismissive. You could also argue at times he verges on the offensive by what he says. We've got our evidence underneath, just some of the sentences there that prove he has this view. And then at the bottom, we have some elaboration. Why does he have this view? So, for example, he thinks it's a novelty or a craze that dies out. He dislikes attention seekers. He thinks that they're ugly or badly drawn. He basically says that they're vandalism of the body, and so on. So that is the reason why he has the view that he does. However, that's only half the story, of course, because now we have to go over to source B in order to make the comparison. So let's look at what R.J. Stephen said in source B. This is from 1898, so this is the 19th century extract. And again, quite quickly, you might be able to work out what his attitude is. Is it positive? Is it negative? So he says, tattooed royalty, strange stories of a strange craze. When royalty hangs on to a craze, you may be assured that the rest of the exclusive world of wealth and power soon follow the same path, and annex the peculiarities of the pleasures of which have given amusement to their heroes born in purple. What wonder, then, that tattooing is just now the popular pastime of the leisured world. For one of the best-known men in the high European circles, the Grand Duke Alexis of Russia, is most elaborately tattooed, and Prince and Princess Waldemar of Denmark, with many others of royal and distinguished rank, have submitted themselves to the tickling but painless and albeit pleasant sensation afforded by the improved tattooing needle. The present fancy for being tattooed mainly exists among men who have travelled much, while ladies have also taken a strong liking to this form of personal decoration, which, from a woman's point of view, is about as expensive as a dress, but not so costly as good jewellery. For the purpose of passing her time in the off-season, the lady about town now consents to be pricked by the tattoo artist's operating needle, and to have her forearm or shoulder adorned with perhaps such a mark as this, a serpent holding its tail in its mouth, a symbol representing eternity. In order to form an idea of the kind of work that is wanted by those who give their patronage to the specific class of fine art, a close examination of these illustrations will assist you. The skill of the tattoo artist, to be realised properly and fairly, must be seen in the beautiful colours on white skin, work which is amazing and as colourful as a rainbow. The sketches he employs are made in various coloured inks. His great skill is the faithful reproduction of any symbol or picture desired by the sitter. These designs vary in size: a small fly, bee, beetle, spider, scorpion, butterfly, cat, dog, tiger, an immense Chinese dragon. These creatures and brutal beasts can occupy the whole space offered by the back or chest, or a huge snake many inches in thickness coiling around the body from the knees to the shoulders like the most beautiful meandering river. And at once the sitter is covered in art, becoming a living exhibit, as if the skin is decorated in the most beautiful of jewels. So again, slightly different view here, if not a very different view. So again, you can pause the video and go back, find your quotes and write them down, which you think prove what the writer thinks of tattoos. Label any methods. Come up with some words to describe their attitude. And think about why the writer has the view that they do. So again, you're gathering your evidence in order to prepare an answer. Okay, so those would be the next steps. Okay, let's now complete the other side of the table then with information of the same kind of categories. So we've now got our attitudes at the top. He has an impressed, astonished, complimentary, admiring attitude. We've got our quotes, and again we've got the reasons why he has this view. He sees it as creative, as art. He sees tattoos in it as improving the body. He sees it as universal to both men and women. He's using royalty to suggest that it's a worthwhile thing to do. He says it's cost effective, it's cheaper than jewellery, for example. You can have lots of different designs as well there, with meaningful symbols, it's colourful, and he says it's painless, so according to him, it's a pleasant procedure to have done. So we have now pretty much all that we need in order to start fitting this together in a response. Before I show you, though, two examples of answers, I'm just going to talk about methods for a little bit, so we can't forget the methods. The second bullet point in the answer booklet will ask us to remind ourselves of methods, in other words, how the writer conveys the view. And you can see here we've got those quotes, and in the right-hand column I've written down some of the devices. We've got a selection of sentence types, we've got some adjectives, some verbs, and also some devices like rhetorical questions, metaphors and similes, and so on. So we also need to tie in our language knowledge as well. So even though this is not technically a language question, we still need to demonstrate that our language analysis can be linked to a comparison of their attitudes. So if you think of that spinning plates analogy, the reason why this question is worth 16 is because there's lots of things for students to be getting on with. you have to tie in the methods as well to some extent. Okay, so what I'm going to finish this video with is to show you two examples, one more successful than the other, in terms of how all this fits together in an answer. And I've colour-coded it as well, so you can see from an examiner's perspective what they're going to be marking. So in red we have the attitudes, and in blue we have the evidence. So you can see they have talked about both extracts, and they have spoken about both writers. They have quoted from both, but it's relatively short. So they say the writer of source A doesn't like tattoos because he says that people are thickos if they get them. He also says that celebrities who get tattoos don't look good, and everyone has tattoos nowadays. The writer of source B likes tattoos. He says that tattoo artists have skills and tattoos look beautiful like jewels. So the writers think different things. That will get you some marks, but it's not going to get you many marks because it's quite simplistic and it doesn't mention any methods either. So there isn't really an effort there to link methods to it, and they're also not explaining why they like or don't like tattoos, as the case may be. So that's a simplistic answer in order to get maybe 3 or 4 marks perhaps out of 16. To go towards the other end of the mark scheme, you would aim to write something like this. Again, red here means anything which is to do with describing the writer's perspectives or attitudes. The blue is the evidence, again, the quotes, and the green here is the methods. Around all of that, in normal black font, is why they have those attitudes. So this is a more successful answer, again answering that same question. So it says, Parsons expresses a judgmental, critical, and dismissive attitude towards those who have tattoos. This is conveyed through phrases such as sinking heart and skin crawls, suggesting he is filled with a sense of dread when he sees people, including celebrities, such as David Beckham and Cheryl Cole, with excessive tattoos, which he compares metaphorically to a florist shop on people's skin. The adjective dumb and rhetorical question, but why, reinforces Parsons' confusion and sarcastic perspective. Parsons' attitude could also be seen as offensive and disrespectful when he calls people thickos, as if tattoos indicate someone's intelligence. Clearly, Parsons sees tattoos as offensive. He believes that they ruin people's natural beauty and are not unique because everyone has them and similar designs. He doesn't consider them as art, instead mocking some for being badly drawn. However, so we've got our connective there showing that point of contrast. However, Stephen's attitude about tattoos is more complimentary, and he not only admires people who have them, but the designs themselves. For example, he uses anecdotes by referring to people of royal descent, such as Grand Duke Alexis, suggesting people who are well known have tattoos. A number of similes and metaphors convey the writer's admiration. Their tattoos are compared to a rainbow, and people to living exhibits, as if those with tattoos are like art in a gallery. Furthermore, tattoos are likened to jewels, suggesting they are of value and are precious like fine jewellery. So you can see there much more effort by the student to link in the methods, to elaborate on why they have those views, and those red attitude words are also consistent throughout the whole response. Again, this would get you, between 13 to 16, so towards the top end. Okay, so that is what this question is asking you to do, to compare the two writers. So you're putting the writers in the driving seat. And of course, the writers will be introduced to you in the little box at the top of the extract when it tells you about the date it was written, where it was written, what it's about, that kind of thing, that kind of context box, as I sometimes call it. So that's why using the writer's surnames can be important here. Okay. Finally, if you wanted to think of the writing task, of course, the writing task for paper 2 is often linked to the topic of the extracts. So no surprise, the writing task would probably be about something to do with tattoos or appearance. So I've just literally come up with this one. Tattoos look dreadful, they are a waste of money and detract from people's natural beauty. Write a speech to be given to young people explaining your view. So that could be something you have a go at as well. just reinforcing the fact that the writing task for question 5 will always be linked somehow to the extracts that you get in your exam for paper 2, okay, linked by topic. So hopefully that has been useful for this more challenging question, I think, for paper 2. If we just go back to this cycle, lots of plates being spun here. That's why they give you 16 or the chance to get 16 marks here. You must go through this process before you're in a position to write your answer. Whether that's part of a plan or just simply highlighting as you go, making annotations on the extract, this is the kind of stuff that you'll need to do well in your paper 2 question 4 task. Okay, so hopefully that has been useful. Thank you.